Hi everyone, it's Steph here from Chaos in the Craft Room. Thanks so much for joining. Today I'm going to go through a few alternatives that I use when making cards with alcohol ink. So I often make my own alcohol ink and I have a few alternatives I use instead of Yupo paper because Yupo paper is really expensive. Or if you're just interested in what type of cards I make with alcohol inks, I will show those at the end of my video. If you like this video, please hit the like and subscribe button and let's get started. So the first thing I do when I start working with alcohol inks is I set up the room and I use a metal tray like shown here in this video and a tea towel underneath, and that's really just because I tend to spill things a lot and I don't want alcohol ink going everywhere all over my carpet, so I set that up and I also open the window, and that's just to help with the airflow so the room doesn't smell too much. Now the first alternative I use to Yupo paper is, as you can see here, it's photo paper, and in this example you can see I'm showing the Brother photo paper, but really you can use any type of photo paper. Just keep in mind that they all do work slightly differently and react differently to the alcohol ink, so keep that in mind. I guess the benefit of Yupo paper really is that it is a synthetic paper, and that means it's non-absorbent, and really any other paper that you use is slightly porous and therefore the dyes are absorbed slightly. So that's why I always put down the alcohol or alcohol blending solution first. So here you can see my little bottle there that I have just alcohol in there. And I put that onto the photo paper first, and then I follow it with the alcohol ink, and that's just to prevent the alcohol ink from being absorbed straight away into the photo paper, and so we get the look that we want. You also have to work a little bit quicker, but not too much, so that's okay. And I also make my own alcohol inks, and that's from alcohol-based pens and Sharpies. So thanks so much from Alison from Dream a Little Bigger for this suggestion. She has fantastic instructions of how to make your own alcohol inks on her blog, so I will link that below for you. And I found she suggests Sharpies, but I found that any alcohol-based pens, including whiteboard markers, work really well. The only thing to keep in mind is how much alcohol you actually put in, because that will dilute the colour. So the stronger you want the colour, the less alcohol you put in when you make the mix. And just something else to keep in mind here is I'm using alcohol here instead of the alcohol blending solution, and it is diluting the red colour, giving it sort of a pinky colour. So that wasn't the look I was going for, so I stopped there. However, I still could create a fantastic card from that, and I'll show you all my card creations at the very end. So keep that in mind. Never stop halfway through. And with this green, I find that less of a problem as it creates more of a lighter green. And you can see in my examples that I do use this metallic gold pen, and as it is alcohol based, it works really well as well. On this card and the previous card, I was using the HP photo paper, and I find that that works very similar to the Brother photo paper. However, the next paper that I'll use is actually the Big W photo paper, and that one reacts a little bit differently with the alcohol ink, so just feel free to use any of the photo papers, but keep in mind that they can act differently. And it's not necessarily a bad thing because they all provide really good looks. It just depends on the type of look that you're going for that particular card. So always give something a go. I find even if you think it hasn't worked, sometimes it can create the most spectacular background. Now I just want to show an example of using a store-bought alcohol ink. Now you can see I've gotten ink everywhere around the outside of the bottles, but just to have a look at the difference of when you do use a store-bought colour, just to show you the difference, I'm using it with the alcohol as well, and you can see that the colour itself isn't diluting as much as the homemade alcohol ink. Now that could just really be dependent on how much alcohol I added in the mix to begin with, or it could just have to do with the actual pigment in that bought alcohol ink. So just something to keep in mind, that they all look really good, but it just depends what sort of look and colour you are going for. Alternatively, you could use the alcohol blending solution instead, and that's less likely to dilute the color. So both backgrounds look really nice, just a bit of a difference with that diluted. So for this next one, I'm going to use that Big W photo paper. Now, Big W is just a cheaper shop in Australia, but I'm sure you'll find something anywhere in the world that reacts similar to this. Now, I'm going to use a store-bought or brand name alcohol ink because I know this same effect happens with both of them, but I just wanted to show you it's not just the homemade ones that react like this. So I'm going to use alcohol once again and with this store-bought ink. And what I see when I use this photo paper is it actually cracks. It has this crackly look. And initially I thought I can't use that, but then when I looked at it more and more, I was just amazed at the way that it looks and actually thought it was quite mesmerizing, and it was actually quite a unique look that I could use in my cards, and it's actually one of my favorites now. So it does give this cracked look, and it's because it's reacting with something on the photo paper. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but if I use it even with the alcohol blending solution, it has the same reaction, and it's not just when I just use a lot of alcohol on there. But I think this is a really spectacular look, and you'll see the type of cards that I create with this. And it's quite a really unique look that you just can't quite create with anything else. So absolutely love the texture in it. And you'll realize it'll continue to crack until it's dried, completely dry on there. So the end look does change from when you first add it onto the paper. All right, so for the next type of paper that I play around with and use is actually any sort of advertising paper. So I just get this from any of the stores that have advertising materials that use a bit of glossy paper. And the glossier the paper, the better. I do find though with this type of paper, because it does absorb quite a lot, as it's not super glossy, that it doesn't give that glossy look. It absorbs quite a lot, so it's a bit of a matte look. And I actually quite like that look for certain cards, so it's something to have a bit of fun and play around with. But just keep that in mind. If you are going for a really shiny look, this is not the type of paper for you. I know a lot of people do actually use or paint a gel medium onto paper, and that actually clogs up some of the pores. So it actually prevents it soaking into the paper like it's doing in this example. So that is certainly something else you can do and create your own sort of Yupo paper. But I quite like playing around with the different looks I can get with the different papers. And in this example, I'm really just doing it on an A4 bit of paper, and that's because I'm going to chop this up into quarters, just so I've got a corner of the alcohol ink on the corner of the card. So for the last example here, the paper that I'm using is super glossy paper, and that's actually in Australia at Australia Post. They put stamps in these booklets for stamp collectors, but at certain times of year, the post office actually uses those stamps as well. So they actually throw these out. So if you are in Australia and have a post office nearby, I recommend going to ask them if they have any of the stamp collectors stamp books that they're throwing out, just the booklets themselves without the stamps in it, and they might just give them to you. And this paper is super glossy, and I find it works really well with the alcohol inks and doesn't absorb too quickly. And they have them in all sorts of colors every month. It's sort of a different theme. So over time, you'll get a really good range. But this one's black, which I just love with the gold on top. Now, what I find is that the actual alcohol can affect the paper itself. So you can see here it's turning slightly silver as well, which is really nice to have that silver and gold. But when I use the ink blending solution, as you'll see in the next example, that it doesn't have that same reaction with the paper. It just stays fully gold. So once again, just really fun to play around with. And I actually love getting these, one, because it's recycling, and two, that the actual pocket that you can see on the opposite side where I'm not ink blending is I actually use that to make my cards and have an extra sort of hidden pocket. And you'll see that in my examples at the end of this video. You can really use all components of this stamp book. And I'm not sure if that's something that they have in other countries as well, but definitely worth finding out. So I'm sure there's something similar that you could recycle. And just remember, you can use alcohol ink also on glass, ceramics, and a canvas. So there's definitely more options than just paper for alcohol inks, depending how creative you want to get. And just remember, you don't just have to use it in the stereotypical way of putting the droplets onto the paper and then blowing it around. You can use other things to wipe it around the page, and it will give a different type of look. Now, when you go directly onto the page, as you'll see in this example, see how I didn't put any alcohol down first? I just wanted to show you how it does absorb directly into the paper. And this is why I always put the alcohol down first. So see how you really get that direct color absorbed there, and that's really not the look we want to go for. So the other option is, if you don't want to put the alcohol down straight away first, here you can also put it onto the actual paintbrush or brush, whatever you're using to wipe it on the page if you don't want the typical alcohol blending look, and that will prevent that immediate absorption in that one spot where you're dropping the alcohol ink. So just have a bit of fun with it. You know, you don't have to do everything in the typical way that you see things being used, and I find that's when you discover new ways. Okay, so now to look at some of the cards that I've created using my alcohol inks with these alternative papers. And I know the look isn't necessarily the typical alcohol ink look, but I still absolutely love the effect that it gives. And you can really change the way you use the inks to create the look that you want. Now this one you see now is actually one that I created with the advertising paper, so you could see it was a bit duller than the other ones. And I just love the crackling look on this one. It's really just like using the crackle paste, just without the crackle paste. And same with this one, it's also got a bit of that crackling effect, which really just adds a beautiful texture to it. And with this card, don't forget you can chop up the actual page that you've got the alcohol ink on. Don't be afraid to do that. You don't have to use it as a whole piece. And I just love die cutting some of the images from the alcohol inks. And usually they're the pages that you think, oh, I haven't created a nice background, so I'm not going to use it. But they're the ones that usually look really nice when you do die cut from it. And when you do die cut from it, like you can see here, you can actually use both parts. So the background and the section that you've die cut. So another creative way to use them. You can see here I might be a little bit addicted to the crackling effect that I get on these cards. But what I love here is that also you don't fill the whole background with alcohol ink. You can just do it on a portion of the card. And don't forget, on this photo paper, you need to use pigment ink. And here one more with the blue with the crackliness, and I just think it gives a really nice effect, the alcohol inks, as a water sort of feel to it. So any sort of water themed card I think goes perfectly. And don't forget, you can also emboss the paper that you alcohol ink, and this one adds a really nice sort of mystical feel to it with it embossed. And sometimes just keeping it simple is the best way to create a really nice alcohol ink card. I just love the gold through this card, and that was created with just the gold pens, not even alcohol ink pens. And this black background with the gold on front turned out really well, and I thought it was a bit magical, so I created a Harry Potter card. Not sure how many Harry Potter fans are out there. And once again, I've die cut these, and can make 3 cards with this one alcohol ink image that I created. So it's the outer portion, the inner circle, and this is the outer circle. And on this card, on the brown sections, I make my own mica powder sprays. So please subscribe if you want to see my future video on how I make these sprays. And I just think this is an adorable card. And I also tried heat embossing this one, and it is photo paper, so I sort of forgot it's a bit of a plasticky paper. It does swell. I did find if I put something heavy on it, it does flatten a bit, but there is still a little bit of warping there. And I also love putting some vellum on top of a section of it, so that a section is a little bit hidden. And finally, the stamp booklets that I create and use for the paper for the alcohol ink. So you can even use that little pocket that comes with it, and that's how I've created this card. I've just used that half the card, the section that I didn't alcohol ink, and just use it as a pocket to put in a little gift card. You might notice the flowers that I've die cut onto this card are actually the second card that I created when I was making the alcohol ink backgrounds, and I stopped halfway because I didn't like it because the red was being diluted with the alcohol. But it just goes to show it's worth pursuing. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you really enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit the like and subscribe button, and I can't wait to see you next time.